right, so here's the deal. We are going to take a bit of a journey together with this little fellow. This is the ACS1 from Walrus Audio. It's the Walrus Audio Amp and Cab Simulator 1. And the backstory is this. I have always played real amps. It's not like tube amps. It's not like a snobby thing. It's just like what everybody I looked up to did when I started playing. And so from my first ACS1 all the way to my current stereo amp setup, that's just always been what I used. And I've used a few different simulator type things before. I've never wanted to do the like kind of all-in digital thing like a Axe-Fx or Kemper or whatever, just because I've spent a bunch of time in pedal world and building a pedal board. But when these things like the Iridium and this guy and all the other ones kind of started getting into that space, I mean, Kemper was there. I liked the idea of being able to use my existing pedal board into something that is digital, simply for consistency and ease of use, portability, weight, that kind of thing. My previous experience has left me wanting in terms of how it felt and sounded, but this one I think is the only one currently on the market in this format that will let you do two different amp models on each side of your signal. I play in stereo all the time. My amps are of the same type. They're both Fender type amps because that's what I prefer. But they have different sound characteristics, and when you do that in stereo, you get a good width of signal. And this lets you do that. So what I figured I would do is I'll be demoing this also just kind of in my standard way, but then I thought I'd document the whole process of trying to learn how this works, learn how it sounds, and then kind of A/B it compared to my current sounds, which I'm happy with. I'm not unhappy with what I have. I just am curious if I can get this close, because I've heard a lot of people have really good results with these, with the Iridium, kind of a pedal board going into something digital. That's a mixed bag too, but again, it's not a snobby thing. If I hear one more person go on about how one is strictly better than the other, I might have a fit, but this is, like I said, it's a journey and exploring. So you get to explore with me, and maybe we can learn something useful together. So here we go. Step one is going to be plugging this in and connecting the USB here and doing a firmware update. Supposedly they did a major one recently that went a long way in terms of expanding its capability and its sounds. We're going to make sure it's on the most current one before we start. All right, so first we got the USB and the power plugged in, and the first thing is to head over to, with Google Chrome, to walrusaudio.io, which is a handy little website that lets you, I mean, you can see it on the screen here. It just brings up whatever pedal it sees connected. I have an M1 on my board. I've used an R1 in the past, so I guess that's why it's showing up. But I've never used this. I mean, I've used the M1 to update, but the interface is really simple. I just click this because it sees it. There's an IR manager here, which we'll get into later, to where we can load our own impulse responses, which I have a few that I want to try, but I want to hear the stock ones first. So I'll click firmware. It's thinking. Version 129 is the latest. So we are good to go on the firmware. So check and check. Next, I want to record the signal just going into the amps clean and then throw a drive on. Not necessarily to like match them exactly, but just to get a frame of reference recorded, because then in editing we can go back and kind of play them, you know, next to each other. And I suspect a lot of it will be feel, and I can't exactly emulate what I have, but we'll just do it anyway, because then it'll be good for editing. now we got the pedal plugged in here. I did the demo for this, which I will link, and I was really surprised at how little time it took to get a good sound that I was happy with, like right away, with what was in there. Especially just with clean. I haven't plugged in pedals and anything yet, but this is running last out of my pedal board now. And so everything's off on the board, and then we're just gonna try and dial this thing into, and you're just gonna be on board with the whole thing. This is the stock Fender model preset. And then the Marshall. And the Vox. So what I know I want to at least go for, I'm more drawn to the Fender first and foremost, because I'm a Fender amp person. So right out of the gate, I'm like, yes, that, but with less bass. The Marshall, I don't know, there's something about it that just doesn't resonate, so I'm not going to start with that one. And then the Vox, I'm like, I like that, but less treble. And so I'm going to start with Fender left side, Vox right side, except Fender with less bass and maybe a little more high-end, Vox with way less treble, maybe a little bit more bass, and save that and kind of see where that goes. So volume-wise, gain-wise, I think it's pretty consistent, and then I'll listen to my clean from the other one. I'm taking out all the room on it because all the presets have a little bit of this room knob in there, and I'm taking all that out because I don't want reverb built into this. I want it just like my amps, which are buried in a cab somewhere, and I don't use any onboard reverb because I've got reverb coming from my board. So step one will be both amps turning the room off, and then I'll, like I said, I'll set up, let's see, left side, Fender, and I think I was enjoying the creamback cab, and then right side, Vox, and I don't remember what cab. I think I'll just leave what's there, which is probably the blue. So I'm going to leave that and start from there, and then, like I said, you'll see me go, I'll reduce the bass on the left side, I'll reduce the treble on the right, make sure the volumes are equal, and see where that leaves us. So, yeah. that's pretty good, I think. I think we got that more or less saved. What I hope that Walrus does in the future is make their Walrus IO website something where you can visually adjust the parameters on the pedal in addition to the firmware and the IR manager and all that stuff, which I haven't done IRs yet. I might in a little bit, but because it can be a little bit like overall it's really easy to dial in stuff, but it's just when it comes to customizing both sides especially, you're like, I was a little bit like, so where was the bass? Because like if I turned it way down for one preset, then the knob's there, but I switched to the other one, and then if I move it a little, it like jumps there. So I don't know, it would be a little easier to visually remember where stuff is there. So, but anyway, so now out of curiosity, I'm gonna play back my sound clip from earlier that I captured of my actual amps clean and see about the difference there. So again, the goal isn't necessarily to mirror it exactly, because it's two different versions of Fender amps, and you know it's never going to sound exactly right, and it's not supposed to. But getting something that it's like, yeah, I like that sound was pretty easy, and then getting something to where I don't know if you could tell listening back to that, it was like there's a little more bass in the original. I got the treble close, and then I just mid bumped both sides a little bit more than what they were, and that's like reasonably close. And so now I'm gonna throw on the same overdrive I had before and compare those two and just see kind of how it reacts and how it feels to have the overdrive in there. The overdrive is a Tumnus Deluxe for what it's worth, kind of a main kind of stage 2-ish overdrive situation. So. So there again, it's not. It's certainly not exactly the same. And I would expect that, and I've run into this before, like kind of going from an analog rig to a digital one where you kind of get, because it's not going to respond exactly the same, and then it's going back and forth that's really hard. It's like you kind of commit to one, like I've committed to, or not committed to, there just wasn't an option other than amps. And now doing this, it's going back and forth is like torture, like unfair torture. Whereas, because I would have to tweak my overdrives for how this responds, just like I would if I changed my amps. Like if I changed one of my amps to an actual Vox, I would have to change all the things like I'm doing right now. And so this is more of just an idea of how to start getting there and what things sound like. So, but again, it's certainly not like a bad place to start. I just think there's a couple parameters on the pedal that I would tweak for this platform versus that one. Gain-wise, things are metering pretty similar. Let me just double check that actually. So yeah, real similar on the meters. They're getting to about the same place. The ACS1 may be a hair louder, but it's still a little bit less trebly than the signal that I had from the amp. So interesting to note. All right, next I loaded in some IRs. I bought a pack of IRs a while ago from a guy named David Hislop, who has great tones and makes IRs for all kinds of stuff. He actually just yesterday released one that was a Vox specific one that was specifically modeled for the ACS1. Excuse me. Maybe I'll check that out at some point. But for now, I just put a bunch of his, all three back cab slots. I just put 3 of his, and then I put one in the A. And so what I have now is I've got the built-in creamback on the left paired with the Fender amp, and on the right I've got the the stock blue speaker that's paired with the right one. So I'm just going to mess with his. There's a variety of things. What did I put in there? I put in a greenback of his. I put in an Eminence speaker, a G12, something or other from a Marshall. I don't know. It's a bunch of stuff, mostly in the back cab. So the idea is just to see how the other IRs differ from the stock one that I had saved in the preset, and just kind of see how that affects things. So here goes that. So I don't know that I've really learned anything other than there's just a bajillion options, like the way that every speaker responds. And there's something to be with stereo. It's interesting, like, it's harder to get a sense of what each speaker does individually when it's only in one ear. Versus, like, if you were dialing it in mono, it'd be really easy to just be like, nope, don't like that speaker. Nope, don't like that one. And with you could almost go one side at a time. You could be like, okay, I know I want the Fender model. Which speaker do I like best? I know I want the Vox. Which one do I like best? I'll use those in stereo. But there's also something to be said for liking something in isolation versus liking it when it's spread out. And so I try and leave it stereo and then dial things in. But I've noticed even with real amps, like when you run true stereo, like a different amp on each side, like it matters less what the amps are. Like you can prefer the sound of one Fender style amp or Vox style amp over another. But as soon as they're in stereo, the differences become more negligible because you're just creating different information and like a wider field than you would normally, which is like you can prefer one Fender style amp or a Vox style amp over another in isolation, but as soon as you run them in stereo, it becomes harder to discern the differences, which is kind of a good thing because it just, it's all about what makes the field wide and what sounds pleasing to the ear and all of that. But it's interesting with the IRs that there's not, like, you can totally hear tonal differences in each one of them. You know, the IR for the Marshall 412 that I put in there is noticeably more bassy than the others. But then you can counteract that on the unit by cutting the bass, and so you kind of you split hairs at some point, and you could drive yourself to oblivion with the choices, or at least I could. And the stock options are good, and so it's just really probably more time with an overdrive on, like with effects, kind of trying to dial things in and maybe find two of the stock ones that work, two of the non-stocks that work, and then just kind of nuance it from there. But either way, it's nice to have all the options. They can end up being kind of analysis paralysis, if you will. All right, so I'm actually going back to my stock preset for the moment, just to because I was saying it will be more interesting to see kind of when it's in context of actually playing with effects and whatnot. And so I'm going to turn on some effects actually with everything, like some reverb and whatever from my board, and run that through here and just kind of see how that changes or doesn't change how I feel about the model I came up with. it's interesting because, again, like without spending any time changing all my pedals like I would if I changed amps, which I effectively have, it's once you add all the things, it feels really good to play it. And you could hear when I changed IRs in the middle of, and it makes a drastic difference because you're just like, what? And so it's, dialing it, kind of picking one that you like and then dialing into it is pretty crucial step because when you're playing amps, you can't just, most people can't just like, they don't have like every cab available all of a sudden. You can just all of a sudden switch out for like a 412 and a, whatever with a whole different mic on it. And of course it would respond differently just as if you change the amps. And so you do kind of drastically change your tone every time that you switch one of these parameters because you could hear it change it. The other speaker IRs that I put in there were a little bit less full range, especially on the left side. And so it totally changes it. It's not like a good or a bad sound. It's just different. And so, but again, like kind of as in where you go from mono to stereo and the amps or effects make less difference when you go, dry, really dissecting and being critical of what the tone is versus when you play, with all your effects on, it makes less of a difference. And none of this is even in a mix. And so like once you're in a mix, that's why to me the whole digital versus analog thing really is about like feel more than anything else because you're going to be able to get sounds that you like. And honestly, this feels better than I thought it would. So yeah, all in all, the interesting thing to me will be because I'm totally convinced now that I would enjoy and did enjoy, especially with all the effects engaged. Like I enjoy what this sounds and feels like. It'll be the next step for me will be playing it live, like because every other time that I've used a simulator of any kind, again, I was kind of comparing it to the real thing, the analog version of things, and they're never exactly the same. But spending time dialing this in and like committing to playing it both at home and live for a little bit will be the next step to me and kind of see how that does. So maybe I'll do a follow-up with that or something if anybody cares, or I'll post it in the comments or something. But either way, hopefully that has been, if you've been bored enough to watch this whole thing, hopefully it's been helpful to at least see someone's process and kind of what the experience has been like, especially if you are an amp person. Again, for me, I'm surprised it was easier than I thought it would be to get sounds that I liked. And I'm genuinely interested to kind of rework my effects around that and see if it's as satisfying to play live. So again, hopefully that is helpful on some level for someone somewhere out there. And yeah, just as usual, reply in the comments, whatever. I'll put all the links, timestamps, all that kind of stuff below to make it easy to navigate. But if you have thoughts or opinions or questions or whatever, just let me know and I'll be interested. And otherwise, I'll see you later.